College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. For the last 5 years, I've spent my time traveling the country and training financial advisors on how to be college funding experts. While it was very fulfilling, I wanted to make sure I could come back and work in my business and in my office and help raise the family that I've created with my wife. We are coaching and everything. We're involved in all of the activities. The reason I share this with you is because we're in the same boat you are. We have 4 kids that we have to send to college, and I get a lot of fulfillment from helping families navigate the difficulties of the admissions process and the inherent financial burden of higher education. So I'm working on the same thing you guys are. I've got athletes, I've got scholars, I've got kids that absolutely are engaged in lots of things. And again, we worry about the price of college at the same time you do. Before I get rolling on my presentation, I want to introduce you to why I love what I do and a story about Joe and Ann, a family I met about 15 years ago. When they came to me, they were very concerned about the price of college. They had worked very hard to get their kids through high school and to be engaged in activities and go through this process. But the bill for college was one that they weren't prepared for. They had accrued some credit card debt, $130,000 to be exact, which I know is pretty steep. And they were sort of petrified. And in a local library at the time, they came up to me and said, "Hey, can you help?" And I said, "Why don't you come in and have a conversation with us? We'll sit down and figure out if there's anything we can do." And I tell you that story because not long after their youngest graduated college, I got a letter. And in our office, we have college pennants that hang all over the place. And attached to this college pennant was a letter from Joe and Ann. And I want to read it to you. It says, "Another one for your collection. On Saturday, Emily graduated summa cum laude from Catholic University. She was awarded the highest distinction for psychology majors, as well as the Catholic University Our Community Award. She has already accepted a position with Temple University as a research assistant in the psychology department." It goes on to say, "While Emily did the hard academic work, we cannot thank you enough for helping to make this happen. We came to you nervous and worried, and you quickly changed our lives. With your help, we paid for her education, and we set them on a path to success." And the reason that's so important and so impactful is because these letters come in all the time. And families they may get it wrong from the initial standpoint. And what we do is try and clarify for families how the process works, how you can save and pay, and how to do it effectively. The other reason I tell you that story is because last month, Joe and Ann retired. And they retired early. And it was something they thought was not going to be possible with the college tuition bills that were ahead of them. And so that's why I love what I do, for stories just like that. That's also a reason that we've been ranked nationally for the last decade and a half in college as college funding experts, right? We help families like this navigate this process and go through it. I think if there's a takeaway in this whole presentation, it's that going to college is like flying on an airplane. Everybody's going from point A to point B, and everybody pays a different price. I'm going to teach you all of that in this presentation. In addition, the key to a successful college journey is digging in early and being proactive in the process, right? The most expensive school in the country right now, well, there's several of them, but the price tag is somewhere in the $105,000 to $106,000 a year, right? University of Chicago is one of them. But what people don't realize is that the average family pays under $40,000 a year to attend that institution. This presentation is designed to teach you how that's possible and why it happens. You've probably seen us. We have a podcast called College Knowledge. We've been interviewed in all kinds of news media. And it's for our sort of digging in and being experts in this field. The reason that we started the podcast is because we have access to people that families typically don't get access to. We get to ask high-ranking officials all over the country in higher ed the questions we think parents want to know and understand. And so, again, take a look at the podcast. It's collegeknowledge.net. And you can listen to interviews from deans of admission to experts in the financial field on college to schools that have co-op programs and the directors of their co-op programs and how their programs work. It's not that I'm telling you to subscribe or like, although obviously I would appreciate it if you did. The idea is we've interviewed 170 different individuals in higher education. Some of that information will be very valuable to you in your college search. So please take a look at College Knowledge. You can find it anywhere you find podcasts. Dig into the episodes that have information on things that you're interested in. It will be a great starting point for you and your student to hear from the horse's mouth the truth about all of the different systems that are out there. I want to play a clip for you on the College Knowledge podcast that we did with a gentleman by the name of Jeff Salingo. Now, Jeff Salingo's history is very interesting. When he graduated college, he went to work for the U.S. News and World Report. He was the man responsible for creating the college ranking lists. And he makes some very interesting comments in this podcast. He then went on to serve as the editor-in-chief of the Chronicle of Higher Education for the next 16 years. He's a well-published author. He's very knowledgeable on the subject, but he makes some great points here that I want you to listen to.
Are there strategies, Jeff, that you think the common family just doesn't know about when it comes to applying to schools?
I'm still surprised at how many families don't understand merit aid and how to play that game. In Who Gets In and Why, my last book, I had this discussion about the buyers and sellers list. Many schools are sellers, meaning they don't really need to give financial aid to fill seats because they're overwhelmed with applications. That's probably about 40 or 50 schools at the very top of the rankings. The vast majority of schools are buyers, meaning they have to offer discount coupons, even to students who don't have financial need necessarily in order to fill seats. And parents really have a hard time understanding that concept. Well, what do you mean I'm going to get aid from somebody that even if they don't think I need it necessarily? I said, well, it's just like Macy's giving you a $10 off coupon or 10% off coupon to get you in the door, because they know when you're in the store, you're going to buy 10 other things than the thing you went in there for. And same thing for colleges. They would rather get some money from you, $30,000 or $40,000, and then have to give you that discount, because otherwise they're going to be left with an empty seat in a classroom or an empty bed. And that concept, once they understand it, opens up an entire conversation about, well, what schools are more generous with merit aid? And then we talk about these buyers on my list, and that really blows them away, because to them, financial aid means financial need, and they feel like, well, I don't qualify for it. But even if they think they don't really understand that there's all these schools out there where they might be the right student that school needs, and thus they're going to throw a decent amount of money from them. And when they understand that, it really, to me, changes the college equation.
So again, in that whole segment, Jeff talks about these buyers and sellers, and he talks about discount coupons. This presentation is designed to teach you why that's possible and how it happens. So in this presentation, I'll cover the concerns that most families have when they come to us in the college environment, the true cost of college. I'll talk about financial aid. I'll talk about loans. I'll talk about free money, grant scholarship, what we call green money. I'll explain the student aid index. I'll walk you through the FAFSA. We'll talk about the game-changing formula. We'll go through sort of what you can do to fund, and then we'll talk about next steps. I want you to keep in mind that this presentation is really the 20,000-foot view, right? I can't give individual and specific information to each of you based on your family situation, because it is a very unique process, right? It's just like taxes in the form that whatever you earn, whatever you go at, that's what they're going to judge and evaluate your ability to afford college on. So it is completely unique to the individual family. In addition to that, each student is performing differently in school. They take different classes. And so it's a truly unique environment. because this is a 20,000-foot view, and I know you're going to have questions, and I know you're going to want answers to your questions, we will offer a consultation, and you can take advantage of it if you want to. If not, no harm, no foul. But that's where we can dig in. That's kind of like part two, where we dig into your personal situation. And our consultations are $250 fee, but we do waive that for anyone that watches our presentations or is referred to us from someone else. But I'll talk more about that later. Let's dig into the college planning timeline, right? For the first 13 years, it's relatively simple. Try and save money for college. Once you get to about that age 13, 7th, 8th grade, all of a sudden you realize the time ahead of you until college is significantly less than the time behind you. And that's when everything sort of takes off and it gets very scrambled and confusing in that process. And so the reality in this is that for a long period of time, it's try and save. And some people do it effectively and some people do it the best they can. But once you hit that high school, that bill's coming due at some point. You got to figure out how you're going to pay for it. So when should families that technically start planning? I've had one family come to our company when their child was born and say, what should we do? And I would love it if everybody came to us when their kids were born to talk about it. But it's sort of a second tier concern when you're having children, right? You got to pay for the diapers and the daycares, and you got to figure out how you're going to get from point A to point B. And we sort of kick that can down the road. And many of you are probably in that situation where, hey, life gets going. You got sports and activities and band and travel and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, college is right there. And so, again, it's a concern for a lot of families. The biggest concerns that we've seen, and we've helped thousands of families across the country in this process, and each of them has these concerns, right? They don't want to miss deadlines, and they certainly don't want to make mistakes in the process. They're concerned that the timetable is shortening and they're not going to have enough time to do everything involved in the college admissions and financial aid process. Most of them are very concerned about how they're going to develop a plan to pay for college. Everyone's concerned about doing something that's going to hurt their chances of admission or hurt their chance in getting financial aid. So we're going to talk about each of these concerns tonight. I'm going to try and educate you guys on how this works. When we help families, our focus is what we call the trifecta of fit. We're looking for the best academic, social, and financial fit, right? The academic fit is, does your child, are they going to thrive in that coursework? Does it have the coursework that my child wants to study? Is it going to be too intense, not intense enough? That's sort of that academic fit, right? Is it the academic sweet spot for them? If it is the academic sweet spot, they thrive and continue. Then you have the social fit, right? We in today's lingo, you'd call it the vibes. Does it have the vibe where your student will find friends and make lifelong relationships and really feel confident and comfortable in their own skin? And if you have those two, you sort of have the child's world figured out. But this third one comes in, which we call the financial fit. And when you get all three of those, that's that sweet spot. That's that best fit school. So we're always trying to coach families into the financial, the academic, and the social fit, right? Because the reality is, if you don't find those, you can extend their education. You can have to pay more for it. They may have to drop classes. If they're performing academically and in a social environment they feel comfortable in, they will perform better. Give you an example of an overpaying for college scenario, right? An extra year or not doing and playing this game effectively. If you were to just overpay by $10,000 a year for one kid, that's $40,000. And I always say that college is a retirement problem in disguise, and people throw their hands up. What are you talking about? Well, the reality is, if you didn't have to spend that extra $10,000 a year in college, and you gave it 15 years to grow, that's $40,000 that grows over 15 years at just a simple 6% rate of return. That's $95,000 that you would have in the future. Maybe that's the year earlier for your retirement. If you let it go for 20 years, it's $128,000. And you can see on the screen the different level. If you overpaid by $25,000 a year, you overpaid by $50,000 a year. The opportunity cost of the money you spend on college is real. And that's why we say it's a retirement problem in disguise. Now, where does this whole process start? It starts with a thing called the cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is the all-in cost for 1 year of school. That's tuition, that's fees, that's your room and board, that's your meal plans, that's your supply costs, transportation costs, and other personal expenses. You can see an example here of one for Haverford College from a couple years ago. On the left, you see the tuition and fees, you see the housing and meals, you see the books and supplies, the transportation, and the other educational costs for a total estimated cost of $90,382. That is the cost of attendance for 1 year at Haverford College. And by law, every school has to give you their cost of attendance. If you want to figure out what it is, you can simply Google cost of attendance at name the school, and it'll kick back to you a price. Now, it's not going to be as accurate as our information, but it'll be within the ballpark and you'll get an idea for what these schools cost, right? So the problem with that is it's not just 1 year you have to plan for. It's all 4 years. Really, it's all 4 years for all of your kids, right? So if you have 3 or 4 kids, you've got to multiply that out by the number of years you're going to be spending. And it goes up 7 to 8% per year. The big concern for us is that the national average for graduation is 5.8 years, which means if you plan for 4 and they have to go for an extra one, does that sink the plan for college, right? And if you don't believe me on that statistic, go look up and try and find 4-year graduation rates. Schools don't post it. They work everything on a 6-year rate. Even if you go to the U.S. News and World Report and Princeton Review and all these materials, they will give you a 6-year graduation rate, right? Why? Well, people change majors. People don't find that sweet spot socially. They don't find that sweet spot academically. Financially, they're strung out or they've gone too high. All of those things change the outcome of college and can extend it. They got to drop a class and pick up a class and extend an extra semester, right? The reality of changing a major is you could have to potentially pay an extra year. The reality of dropping a couple of classes throughout your journey, you either have to pick up a class the following semester, which will probably diminish the grades in the other courses that you already have to take. And it's just an expensive proposition. So let's talk about some average costs at schools around us. We have University of Pennsylvania is $95,000, Ursinus College is $82,000, Gettysburg College is $89,000, Drexel University is $86,000, Lehigh is $91,000. You've got Penn State in-state at $65,000, out of state at $65,000. So if you're from Ohio and you're going to Penn State, you're going to pay $65,000, and then you've got it at $42,000 in-state. University of Delaware is the opposite, right? So if you're in Pennsylvania going to Delaware, you're paying $63,000. If you're out of state, you're paying about $36,000, or if you're in state, you're paying about $37,000. And that's pretty common for schools. We'll go through a few more. You've got Duke that's at $101,000, Emory, Clemson, same thing, in state, out of state, Vanderbilt at $97,000, University of Colorado at Boulder at $68,000. Again, school is getting expensive. Those are your cost of attendance. That's what we call the sticker price, right? So never be fooled by the sticker price, okay? Why are the costs so out of line, right? Well, I can tell you a lot of reasons economically that they're out of line, but it's truly a supply and demand issue. For all those schools that Jeff referenced, which are the sellers, where they have an excess of applicants for their spots in school, they're raising their price because they have demand to do so. Well, if you want to compete with a school that has that demand, you're going to be forced to raise your price because you'll be seen as an uncomparable good. And so there's an inflation that happens. It's not a bubble. It's a supply and demand piece, right? And we've seen since 2000, the cost of college go up over 200%, which is wild because investments haven't done that. And we haven't been able to keep up with that stuff. So the benefit to you guys is that the average net cost paid has gone down. Right. So for these schools that cost $40,000 and $50,000, families are paying $20,000 to $25,000. For those schools that cost $50,000 to $100,000, families are paying somewhere in that $40,000 to $50,000 range. Right. So and the reason that's possible is this little beautiful thing called financial aid. Right. So let's hit that right here. There's 3 types of financial aid. There's need-based financial aid, there's merit-based financial aid, and then there's private scholarships. Private scholarships make up about 2% of all aid given out each year. There's an incredible amount of money out there, but I'll see a lot of people trip over dollars to pick up nickels by going for all these little scholarships. I'm going to teach you the right way to go through that as we go through this presentation. So where does financial aid come from? Let's talk about the sources for a minute. So first of all, it's defined as anything that helps a student pay for college. Any money that reduces your out-of-pocket expense is considered financial aid. It comes in two forms. You have green money, which is your grants and your scholarships, gift aid that does not need to be repaid. Then you have red money or self-help money. That's the money that will have to be repaid in some fashion or another. It may be a result of a loan that you have to pay back in cash. It could be a program where you get money for working on campus and it goes towards your tuition. And then there are private loans. So again, there's two types of financial aid that we look at. Red money has to be repaid. Green money that does not have to be repaid. There's a lot of misconceptions about financial aid too that I want to hit while we're on it. Number one, the first misconception is that financial aid is just loans. There is an incredible amount of money that is given away each year. Almost $70 billion is given away that does not have to be repaid every single year. So it's not just loans. You make too much money. This is the second misconception. You make too much money for financial aid. If you pay attention to what Jeff said in that brief snippet of the podcast, the reality is some schools will give merit-based financial aid regardless of the situation of need. And so money has nothing to do with discount coupons, nor does it have anything to do with merit-based financial aid. My child's not a great student is the next misconception. Reality, yeah, your child has to get into the school, but need-based financial aid has absolutely nothing to do with academic performance. So there's money in the game for kids that aren't great students at the same time. Remember, these schools have to fill their enrollment. They are little cities that have to operate on a budget. If the money doesn't come in the door, if they don't have the students in the seat, they can't run the dining halls, they can't run their programs, they can't turn the lights on campus. So they have to fill their seats. That means students of all varieties will be accepted at institutions and given financial aid. The next misconception is that the college aid offices will help. I sort of always pose this back to families. How many people go to an IRS agent's office and say, how much do I owe you in taxes, right? The IRS's job is to collect taxes, not to minimize your taxes. We use accountants. We use software to mitigate the amount of money we pay in taxes. No different in the college game. The college aid offices are designed to give you as little amount of money as possible and get you still to enroll. Keep that in mind. They're not on your side. They're working for the college. The last misconception is that it's a quick and simple process, right? This is probably the first 18-month process your child will have to go to in their young adult life. We're not used to long, drawn-out processes. Everything is instant gratification anymore. So reality is maybe sometime in the middle of junior year, you start the intensity of this process. It starts with SATs. Then you're doing college visits. Then you're trying to make a list. Then you're writing an essay. And it all culminates with the application sometime in the fall of their senior year. Then you get answers sometime in the spring of senior year. So you're talking 18 to 24 month process that is exhausting for the young mind. So it's just not an easy process. All right. And it's not one that they're used to. So how do you pay for college? We always say there's 5 ways to pay. You can use your savings. And most people, after I get done sharing the price, they're going, hey, well, we don't have $400,000. So what's next? We drop down to the next line, which is loans. Some people will talk about scholarships, and I want to bang this one out right now, because when I say scholarships in this instance, I'm talking about private scholarships. I'm not talking about the university scholarships. I'm not talking about the ones that come through the financial aid process. They make up 2% of all financial aid. I would say look at fastweb.com or look at some of those private scholarship applications or apps, phone apps and computer systems that can generate some opportunities for you. But the main places I look for private scholarship, number one, your employer. You may not know it, but your employer might have a scholarship program your child can apply to. Number two, private clubs and associations that you are a member of. They typically have scholarships. Ask the question. And then number three, I look at the guidance counselors at the high school that they go to. The question would be, hey, did anyone go to school A, B, and C and get a scholarship last year that I may be able to apply to? Fourth way to pay for college, I would say, is go to a cheaper school. I'm going to teach you why that is not necessarily the option for a lot of families in this country and because of the financial aid system. And then number 5 is skip college altogether. I'm not a college is for everyone type person. What I will tell you is that there are some really great trade schools and there's some really successful people. My brother-in-law being one of them, owns an electrical contracting company, never went to college, and is wildly successful at it. But if you are going to go to college, you have to understand what I'm about to teach you guys. So let's talk about the four main sources of college aid. Number one, in line, is the federal government. The federal government issues Pell Grants, SEOG grants, college work study programs, subsidized and unsubsidized direct federal loans for students, the Perkins loan and the PLUS loan. They're typically in the loan game, with the exception of some of the lower income families will receive Pell Grants. To get that, you will fill out the FAFSA, which we'll go through in detail in a little bit. The second source for college aid is the state government. Typically, if you qualify for some federal money, you'll qualify for some state money. The PA State Grant Program, the Pennsylvania Work Study Program, and a lot of states have these programs, not just Pennsylvania. So again, typically once you file, you'll be encouraged to file into state programs as well. But do yourself a favor, go to your state's website and figure out if they have educational college aid programs. The third source for college aid is the universities and the colleges themselves. Private universities and many public universities have private endowment funds outside of the federal and state funds. They will give them to you. They're awarded on a first come, first served basis. And typically the best packages are saved for the top 25% of the incoming freshman class. So again, I encourage you, the biggest place to spend your time, or the place to spend the most of your time, is understanding the colleges and universities, their historic giving, and what type of money they have for you as you go through this. The last place is the private sources, which I already sort of hit on. They really only compromise about 2% of all the loans out there. Don't waste your time tripping over dollars to pick up nickels. Understand where the big pool of money is. And when I say big pool of money, I'm serious. The undergraduate aid doled out last year was $190.1 billion. That's billion with a B. And 76% of that money was in grants and scholarships, green money that does not have to be repaid. So there is a lot of free money out there. You have to understand the game you're playing, understand the financial aid system to benefit your family in the long run from this. Before I get to the green money, let's talk about red money, right? So there are a few loans out there, and I want to just lay out the truth about the loans for you. First of all, the federal direct student loan is a 6.39% interest rate. That's 25-26. The next year's rates are similar. It's 100% in the student's name. It is the only loan a student can take out in their own name. Any other loan above the federal direct loan will have to have a co-signature or a borrower that has credit to take it. They're favorable in interest rates. The loans are deferred while they're in college, as long as they're a full-time student. They go into repayment 6 months after they graduate or when they become a part-time student. The borrowing amount is limited. Part of it can be subsidized up to $2,000 a year, can be subsidized, actually up to $3,500 a year freshman year, and it goes up from there. But the key is the total they can borrow is $27,000. That's $5,500 freshman year, $6,500 sophomore year, and $7,500 junior and senior year. The reality is that's enough maybe to cover 1 year of in-state tuition at an in-state state school. The payment's about $337 a month when they graduate, but that is the only money your student can borrow in their own name. Next, we have the private student loan. The private student loan must have a cosigner. Both the cosigner and the student are responsible for the debt. You apply through a lender. Just like you would for a mortgage. Payments can be deferred, but are not always deferred. Interest rates can be fixed, but are not always fixed. Terms can be 10, 15, 20 years. I would shop for these loans the same way I would shop for a mortgage. Best rates and best terms. They are typically going to be higher interest rates than any type of collateralized debt, right? Because there is nothing other than a signature giving you that debt. And it's different for each person. My advice on the private loans is make sure that you have a plan to repay them if you're going to take them, and understand which one is the best for your family. Reality is that we want to minimize loans across the board for everyone. And the next chart that I'll show you guys, the reality is that if you were to not have debt for college and you had a starting salary of $50,000, the net take home pay for that individual is going to be $36,000. So this equivalent starting salary, no debt, is $50,000. Where it gets hairy is when you start adding some debt in, right? If you had a $50,000 job after graduating college and you had just taken the direct student loans, your debt service is about $3,300 a year. That makes your equivalent starting salary about $46,000 and your net take home $32,000. If you were to take $5,000 in private loans on top of those direct loans, now is where you start to get into a situation where the debt starts to hurt, right? The equivalent starting salary is about $41,000 and the net take home pay is about $28,000, right? So you have a $50,000 job, but your equivalent starting salary is $41,000 because of the debt service. And it goes up from there. If you go all the way to the right side of the chart, if you were to take the direct loan plus $20,000 in private loans and your child was going to have to repay it, they get that $50,000 job when they graduate. Because of the debt service of almost $19,000 a year, their equivalent starting salary is $25,000 and their net take home is $16,000. That's before they pay rent. That's before they pay insurance and cars. It's just not a good scenario. We want people to avoid the debt if we can. That's what we focus on in our company, right? That trifecta fit means that we're making a smart financial decision. At the same time, we're making a smart academic and social decision. Now, let's talk about the Parent Plus loan. Plus stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. This loan is from the federal government. It's relatively easy to obtain, but the student is not part of this debt. It's 100% in the parent's name. The parents are responsible for it. When you apply for the FAFSA, you're applying for the Plus loan. The payments start in 60 days. Payments last for 10 years. There's a fixed interest rate to those loans, and there's 4 points to close. So a good tax-paying citizen borrows from the federal government. They're borrowing $40,000. They've got their starting obligation is over $41,000. They will stack, and compound. If you take anything away from this presentation, please avoid the Parent Plus loan at all costs. They are terrible. There have been some limitations put into them this year. We'll see how that plays out. But imagine you get two kids 2 years apart and you need to borrow $40,000 per kid, right? The cost to borrow is $1,600. The monthly payment for the first loan that first year is $521. Not so bad. But each year you have to borrow the same 40. Then you have two kids in school and you have to borrow. What happens is the monthly payment gets up to $4,200 a year. If you had the $50,000 in cash to afford that debt obligation, wouldn't you have just paid the $40,000 in cash outright? So the end result is you borrowed $320,000, but you had to add the fees on top of $15,000, and the interest was over $160,000. You pay $500,000 plus for $320,000 of borrowed money, and your highest monthly payment is $4,100. That's $50,000 in annual payments to loan service. You can't declare bankruptcy. You can't get out of them. They are federal government loans. The problem is they're typically easy to get. It goes right on your financial aid award and it says you can borrow this money. So pay attention to the financial aid awards and understand if you're borrowing from the federal government and if it is a predatory loan for you. Okay. All right. Now, there are several different ways you can borrow money for college. If you're going to borrow money, would you rather get a tax deduction or not get one? Have fixed monthly payments or increasing payments? Have interest-free student loans or high-interest student loans? Have to take a loan each and every year or have the funds readily available, right? We use the example like, would you rather have 4.5 years, same as cash? 100% you would. You have to understand this stuff before you play the loan game, and you have to shop it like you would any other. Here's an example of a school that got chastised and really made some mistakes in its loan borrowing programs. The title says how Baylor steered low-income parents to debt they couldn't afford. It kept laying out Parent Plus loans to people that could not afford to pay them. These people graduate, and the student graduates, and the parent has $200,000 worth of debt that they should have never been eligible for in the first place. One of the huge problems. And then the second problem with the loan crisis that we're in is that this article was over 60 and crushed by student loan debt. Older Americans are struggling under the burden of student loans, their children and their own, right? So they're taking on double debt loads. It is just, again, retirement problem in disguise. And the other thing I would say about college is it's a cash flow problem, not a net worth problem. You have to understand the game that you're getting into. All right, now let's talk about the positive, the green money for a second. Where does it come from, right? So there's some state money. About 9% of the free money given out is from the states. Private sources are 11%, and that's scholarships at different institutions, as well as that 2% of true private scholarships that we talk about. The federal grants are about 28%, but the institutions themselves give away 52% of the money that comes out in the form of green money or free money that does not have to be repaid. That's why I tell everyone to focus their time on the schools themselves. They have the biggest resources to make college affordable for you. So the types of green money, we talked about merit-based aid, we talked about need-based aid. Let's define them a little more. Merit-based aid is given for academics, athletics, artistic, GPA test scores, not based on finances. Those discount coupons are considered merit-based financial aid. Then you have your need-based. That's based on income, assets, your student aid index. It has nothing to do with the grades or the test scores, okay? The positive side of this whole thing is that while we've seen the cost of college rise over the last 20 years exponentially, that 200% we talked about, we've also seen the amount of money coming from the schools themselves increase by that same margin. Right? If you look, there's $65 billion, nearly $70 billion in green money given out from the schools each year. That's huge. How do you get your fair share? Let's dig into it a little bit. 3 concepts you must know before I teach you financial aid. Number 1, it's called yield. Every school focuses on yield. This is why demonstrated interest truly matters. And I mean demonstrated interest from a click to attended a virtual event, attended a live event. Yield is every school's goal is to get 1 offer letter out and 1 yes back. If I were to give you an acceptance, I want you to say yes. That is yield. They're trying to get a 1-to-1 yield ratio. Any sort of thing they can do to better their yield, they're going to do it. That's the business end of college. It's real. It is what it is. They have a certain number of beds they have to fill. So they're focused on yield. If they get an indicator that you have a very low potential of actually attending, they will hold back that admission and give it to someone else that they can justify and say has a high probability of attending their school. The second concept you have to understand is what's called financial aid leveraging. Almost all private schools and a majority of public schools engage in financial aid leveraging. This is the process in which they give you as little amount of money as possible and get you to still enroll. That's the yield game, and this is how they play it with financial aid leveraging. And then the last one that I think is important to see is discounts. Now, on this slide, I show you guys the discounts at the same school given over a multitude of years, right? So, and I'm sorry to pick on this school, but I have just proof of it. These are 5 different financial aid award letters over the course of 3 or 4 years, and they all have scholarships in them, Dean's Scholarship and President's Scholarship and this, but they're all in that $38,000 to $45,000 range. These are discounts. Even if the family doesn't have need, none of these families had need-based financial aid requirements at that school. Every single one of these families was given money in a discount to try and get their yield up, try and get that family to attend. So it's real, guys. What Jeff was talking about at the beginning of this presentation, Jeff Salingo on that podcast, this is what he's talking about. Okay, now, it's not uncommon for schools to misaward financial aid. How do you get your offer increased, right? Sometimes those work study jobs that I was talking about are people giving out financial aid or sending the letters. They make a mistake when they type out. They put an extra zero, they take a 0 off of the award package, right? But if you don't know your numbers, you don't know the school's numbers, you cannot determine if it's right or wrong. Here's an example of a family we worked with this past spring, and got a fantastic financial aid award from Notre Dame, $68,000 at an $82,000 a year school. That is tremendous, right? You've got the scholarship, you've got 2 scholarships, and you've got a work study program on there. Now, unfortunately, the student didn't want to go to Notre Dame. Great school, didn't want to go there. Where he really wanted to go was Brown. And so on Brown's financial aid award, they said they would give $36,000. That left the family with a $60,000 bill. Now that doesn't make sense. 68,000 at Notre Dame. They meet 100% of need. Brown meets 100% of need. This family had some need, has some scholarship, but they talk about they don't give scholarships to the Ivies. This is where it gets confusing, right? Financial aid is considered any money that reduces your out-of-pocket costs for college. When I saw this, I said, that doesn't make sense. We've got to appeal this, guys. They're not taking into account that you have a second student in college at the same time. I can tell you that right now. So we drafted an appeal letter for the family. And what do you know happens? Brown comes back and says, oh, you're right. We're going to give you $56,000 now. We're going to reduce our price, what you have to pay, to $39,000. Now, it's still not as good as the Notre Dame award, but it is much more appealing to the family. We could make it work within the plan that we had built for them. And at the end of the day, that would have been an $80,000 today money mistake had they done it that way, and almost a $90,000 mistake. And what's the opportunity cost over those 15 years of that mistake, right? That's what we're focused on. That's why financial fit is so important. And that's why understanding how a school gives money and what they take into account is huge, right? So where does this all start? It starts with what's called the Student Aid Index, formerly known as the EFC, or the Expected Family Contribution. It's calculated based on your parents' income from their tax return, non-retirement assets, student income, and age of the oldest parents, and number of dependents in the household. How do you get a student aid index? Well, you submit the FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid. That will give you your student aid index. It is a number that is then given to the schools, right? You must apply or you don't get any aid. You've got to file the FAFSA annually for each child to continue to get your financial aid. You must complete it fully and mistake-free. Mistakes can cost major delays, and a major delay in this process could be the difference between the school having lots of money at the beginning of the season to give out versus no money left to give out. It opens October 1st of your student's senior year, and you want to be in the first 45 days. You want to submit that. The delay I talked about, common mistakes that people make. Please write these down. Do not include IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s. Retirement assets do not need to be included on the FAFSA. Your home equity should not be included in the FAFSA. And if you have major medical expenses, you want to include those as a line item of major expenses that occurred. They will help manage it. But the biggest mistake that we see is that retirement, because the question is, what are your assets? Certainly your retirement is an asset. Reality is you don't have to disclose it, but if you do, the school gets a number that throws off your financial aid eligibility, and you are giving up money and paying extra for school, right? The overpayment for school is what we try and avoid. In addition to the FAFSA, there's a CSS profile. The CSS profile is the privatized versions, College Scholarship Services profile form administered by the College Board. The top probably 600 to 800 schools in the country use the CSS profile. Those are also the schools that have money to give. It is a bear of a form. The FAFSA is relatively simple at 40 questions. The CSS profile is significantly more difficult. In addition to that, you may be asked to fill out institutional forms. They have their own money. They may want their own lending operation to give out, or their own grant operation to give out. If you own a business, you may have to fill out a business supplement form. And then if you're divorced or separated, you may have non-custodial forms to deal with. So again, this is all part of the know. All right. Now, this has been a rapidly changing environment for the last 2 decades. I put this slide out there. The educational laws and amendments, they change all the time. I'm not telling you to be an expert. Just because we geek out on this stuff and we are experts around the college admissions and financial aid program and system, you don't have to be. But what I would encourage you is to have your finger on the pulse of the changes that come through while you have kids going to college, right? If you just look back over the last 6 years, massive overhauls to financial aid have happened, and they've happened in bills that you would think would affect financial aid. Coronavirus response and relief, American Rescue Plan, the one big beautiful bill. All of them made massive sweeping changes to financial aid. So pay attention while your kids are in it. So how do you prevent yourself from becoming a casualty of this? Start planning now. Start your financial and tax planning now. Make sure your tax professional is aware of it. Unfortunately, tax people's mindset is to reduce your tax obligation. Sometimes reducing tax obligation artificially increases what you pay for college. So you just have to have experts in the know and advisors that can help you with that. And then don't even think about the college side until you've done some proper planning. Let's talk about this need to know formula here. So financial aid happens like this. The cost of attendance, and you want to probably write this formula down and understand this. Cost of attendance, that all-in cost minus your student aid index derived from the FAFSA, determines your financial need, your eligibility for financial need. The problem is not all schools meet need equally, right? So imagine if you had a $50,000 cost of attendance and your SAI was $20,000, that means your family is eligible for $30,000. Well, what if that school only meets 40% of need, right? And what percentage of that need is self-help versus red or green money, right? Self-help that you have to pay back, or if it's free money that you don't have to return. So as the example I said, what if they only meet 40% of need, right? You know your needs $30K, but they're only going to meet 40%. That means they're going to give you about $12,000 worth of aid. Now you have to add your unmet need back to the SAI, and you end up paying $38,000 a year. The reality to this is that it's because of schools and the amount of students they have, the amount of debt they take on, or the amount of endowment funds that they have as to how they give out money. As you see on screen, you have Lehigh University, Penn State, Franklin Marshall. They each have a different level of endowment. They each have a different number of students. And you can see the average award at those schools is different, varying depending on the school that they're in. So let me walk you through a true example of how this plays out in real time. And I'm going to use Penn State and Franklin Marshall as the example. I happened to attend Franklin and Marshall. This was a family that came to me looking at these two schools. The rest of my family attended Penn State, so I just love it as an example of how this plays out. This family's student aid index was $8,100. The cost of attendance at F&M was $73. Their need was established at $65. Cost of attendance at Penn State was $37. Their student aid index was $8,000. Their need was $29,000, right? F&M meets 100% of need, and 87% of that $65,000 is going to be free money that does not need to be repaid. Penn State, on the other hand, doesn't meet 100%. They only meet 58%. And so they give $16,000, which leaves a shortfall of $12,000. And 42% of it is gift aid, 58% is self-help or repaid. So you have to add that unmet need of $12,000 back. What do you actually pay at these two schools? You pay $8,000 at F&M and you pay $20,000 at Penn State. The reality is a school that costs twice as much, Franklin and Marshall, your out-of-pocket expense is $32,000. School that costs half the price, your out-of-pocket expenses more than double, right? So how do you pay for college, right? Savings, 529 plans, grandparent 529s, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, UTMAs and UGMAs, loans, cash value life, leveraging real estate, borrowing against retirement. This is how people typically do it. What's the right way for you? That's to be determined. The only one I'll pick on for a minute is the 529 because everybody wants to know what's the reality of the 529. They're not good. They're not bad. It's all comes down to your family, how many kids you have, how you're going to use them. The downside of the 529 is that they count against you for financial aid. They are an asset of the parent that has to be disclosed. The reality is the best way to plan, because what the 529 indicates is that you can put money into a state-sponsored plan and grow it. And if you use the money for qualified education expenses, the growth is tax-free. So the best way to use it would be to put a lump sum of money in early, let it grow for a long period of time, use the gains to fund college. The reality is most people put $50 or $100 in when their kid's born, and they end up with $20,000 or $30,000 in a 529. Some of it's gains, some of it's going to be tax-free. The rest of it is post-tax dollars and basis that goes in. And you just increase what you pay for college. So if you have them, I encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity to talk with an expert. Please do not undo your 529s. That's the worst thing you can do. You have to know when you're going to use them, how they're going to use them, and sort of have a strategy behind it. So what we always say is, what's the right way for you to plan? That's what we've got to figure out. That's what you've got to figure out. I want to talk about the real cost of college as well, because a lot of people assume, okay, it's $70,000, I make $100,000. Well, the reality is you make $100,000, then you pay taxes, then you pay the 70, right? So this chart just illustrates the tax rate on the left column plus 5% state and local, and the actual amount of gross income you need to receive to pay college. So it's not a $70,000 problem. It's a $100,000 problem, but it comes as after-tax dollars, right? And the way you pay matters and where you take it from. As an example, I talked about Roth IRAs just for a second as I was listing off people pay. We had a family come to us. They were going to use a Roth IRA. We didn't know they were going to use it. They believed they were going to pay $46,000. At the end of the day, they ended up getting a bill for $85,000. We said, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Their income was lower. It was around $100,000. We thought they should even paid less than $46,000. Got a hold of their tax return, and here's what we found out. They took a Roth IRA distribution at the blessing of their financial advisor and tax accountant, because it wasn't going to be a taxable event. They didn't want to increase their taxes. Unfortunately, it goes as untaxed income on the financial aid forms, and it just increases what you pay for college. So they used the Roth. They didn't have to pay tax on the money, but the tax came in the way of an increase in SAI. And so that $67,000 increase is what really got them to overpay for college. In addition, they took some distributions and capital gains that increased their SAI by $7,000. So that mistake at the wrong time cost that family almost $75,000 a year for college. That's a tragic mistake that didn't have to happen, and the preservation of that money would have been there. All right, that's why I say, hey, college is that great chasm between you and retirement, right? It's a retirement problem in disguise. The reality is, for most of it, we pay attention to our investments. For most of our life, we pay attention to investments. We pay attention to taxes, but we miss financial aid because we're not in that game. You must pay attention to financial aid while you're in this game, how it affects investment and how it affects taxes. If you take away any one of the legs of that stool, your stool falls over, right? So where do you stand? Our goal, as I said, is the academic, social, and financial fit. That's what we call the best fit. That should be your goal at the same time, right? Now, I don't want to tell you what your goal is, but if you find that academic, social, and financial fit, that trifecta fit, that sweet spot, you are finding the best fit for your kid and your family. We talk about 3 categories of family. The category 1 family is the family that's going to get financial aid no matter where they go. Those families have to look at private schools. They have to get their applications in early, not early action or early decision, but early in the process. They have to get their financial aid forms in early so that they are standing in the front of the line when there's lots of money to be doled out. Then there's category 2 families. They have to do the same thing as category 1 families. To give you an example, category 1 is probably under 100,000 in adjusted gross income and minimal assets. Category 2 is probably 100,000 in adjusted gross income up to 350,000 in adjusted gross income. And they have assets. They have retirement. They've got some cash on hand, some 529s, whatever it may be. Most of the people that love this presentation are that category 2 and category 3 family, because I'm talking to them about this. You've got to do the same stuff the category 1 families have to do, but you have to do one additional thing, which is figure out how to pay what you're going to be asked to pay and to know that number prior to getting there. Then we have the category 3 families. That's over 350,000, could probably afford college, but still don't want to pay. I know category 3 families that have accumulated assets. The one way they've accumulated is by not wasting them or spending them foolishly, right? We like to maximize other people's money for category 3 families. You've got to consider how the financial moves that you make affect retirement, affect that early retirement, and affect the outcome of what you'll pay. And school choice is huge for all of these categories, but particularly for category 3 families. So I want to reiterate, somebody's going to ask at some point, I make too much money for financial aid. College is not just about need-based aid. It's that discount, it's that school, it's finding the right fit. There are many legal ways to affect your cash flows, strategies, student positioning strategies, appeal strategies. There's all kinds of things you can do to maximize what you get from schools and to make sure that you find that best fit school. So what are your options? I always say you can do it on your own and the colleges will love you for it, right? You can let your accountant do it. Unfortunately, some of the accounting principles don't work out well in the college environment. So you really have to be intelligent. You have to make sure your accounting expert is in the loop on what you're doing. But again, I would say you got to make sure that they're experts in financial aid. Okay, so what's next for you? You want to ask yourself these questions. What is your student aid index? This is you knowing your numbers. What is your student aid index? Can you change or improve your SAI? Are you doing anything that inflates or increases your SAI? Do you know the best way to save? From a financial aid standpoint, how much need or merit-based aid does the school historically give families? And are you looking at the right schools? Listen, not everybody's going to take advantage of the consultation, although I think it's foolish. Not everybody's going to do it. I encourage you to get help. Even if it's not from us, understand where you are on this ball field, right? If you decide to get help, make sure whoever you're taking the advice from can answer these questions. Can they lower your student aid index? Will they maximize your eligibility for aid? Can they help you choose schools that give the best aid packages? Can they fill out the CSS profile and the FAFSA with you or for you line by line? Do they know how to negotiate appeals? And can they help you determine how to pay for college tax effectively and efficiently if you don't qualify for financial aid, right? Before I wrap up here, I want to give you the biggest college planning mistakes that we see families make. Not filing the financial aid forms accurately and on time. Not applying to a wide variety of institutions. Cast a wide net. Ignore sticker price. Go out and chase it. We'll figure out the rest as you go through the process. Only applying to institutions you think you can afford. It goes right in with that casting a wide net. Well, we're not even going to look at F&M because Penn State's half the price. I showed you the example of how that plays out, and it plays out all the time all over the country. Assuming you make too much money for financial aid. If I haven't drilled that point home, I don't know how to help. Not knowing your student aid index, the school's number, and how much need the school meets. And then lastly, not starting early enough. You cannot start this process early enough. Yeah, maybe we're not talking about applications, maybe we're not talking about admissions, but we certainly need to be talking about the finances. So our offer to you is simple. We will do a college planning assessment for you. No obligation. It'll be personalized to your family. We will give you 60 minutes of our time with a college funding expert to figure out your scenario. Typically, we charge $250 for that consultation. We will waive it for attendees of this workshop or anyone that is referred to us. That is our standard policy. That consultation, you're going to learn probably a lot that you didn't know about your family, but in the worst case, you're going to get an expert to confirm that you're on the right track. So the only requirement that I have is that you schedule it as soon as possible because these are first come, first served. And when they're gone, they're gone. We ask that you schedule your appointment within 2 weeks of this workshop. We do workshops all of the time, both virtually and in person, and we allocate a certain number of appointments. And so at the end of the day, if you want an appointment, they're going to be gone if you hesitate. And then we do ask that if you're married, both parents attend. The reality is this isn't a whisper down the lane scenario. We want to have true conversations and give you both a firm grounding of where you stand in this process. If you would like to take advantage of that, click the link that just popped up on the screen and pick an appointment time that is right for you, that fits your schedule, and consult and figure out where you stand in this game. I'll leave you guys with this. A fool with a plan is better than a genius with none. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something.
bubbles like I'm in the math club. All these studs got the haters rub-a-dub-rub. I squeak away the clean with a rub-a-dub-dub. Bathing through my city with the suds that I produce. Beat steady knocking on my tub, it's guava juice. Tub steady grinding for the bubbles like it's guap. They can't touch me when I'm spending duckies in the shop. Hit the tub tab, hit the tub tab, hit the tub tab. This is that tub rap. Hit the tub tab, hit the tub tab, hit the tub tab. This is that tub rap. 3 a.m. gotta tap away the ghost. Collecting all the bubbles cause you know they do the most. Just be careful cause I heard there's UFOs. Tub tappers, that's the only way to go. You can play this game right from the App Store. When you play it, you can try to get that high